also it's tinged with a little sadness because obviously you won't be with the team beyond the end of this year.
Imagine being the only guy who manages to beat a team that's dominating a sport that wins everything, and you're unemployed. Yes, this is happening. One of the biggest names in motorsport, the guy who's at the top, who's loved by the public, doesn't have a job or a seat for next year. This is the situation of Carlos Sainz, who learned this year that he would no longer be racing for the team to make way for none other than Lewis Hamilton. And with that, he was left without a seat. Now, recently, we've been seeing a lot of buzz and rumors about where Carlos Sainz is going, even more so after the announcement that Fernando Alonso is not going to Mercedes and will continue at Aston Martin, and other people could leave Formula One and return at any time. So come along, and I'll tell you everything you need to know about this Carlos Sainz story. What's the news? What are the rumors and theories about where this great idol of the sport is going? The Spanish driver was the only one who managed to win a race besides the Red Bull drivers in the last 2 years. This year, he already has a 100% record in the podiums. The only one he hasn't reached is because he hasn't raced. But this year, he was fired from Ferrari, so to speak. And with that comes a lot of speculation. Let's go through the news and get everyone up to speed. This year is a very important year for Formula One because many contracts come to an end. Most of the grid doesn't have a contract for next year. This leaves a lot of vacancies and opportunities for several drivers. Let's remember that in Formula One, contracts can be torn up at any time. That's why Carlos Sainz has often said that he's in contact with all the teams. And it's obvious, right? But there are 3 big rumors and 3 big possibilities. Firstly, Audi. Audi bought Sauber, now Stake, and will enter Formula One in 2026. So they're going to have to work with a team that's at the bottom of the grid and turn it into a powerhouse. To do this, they want Carlos Sainz and Nico Hülkenberg. This rumor has been circulating for a while now. Audi's interest in the two is long-standing, and this is another opportunity for Carlos. But why can't we say that Carlos is going to Audi? Firstly, Audi doesn't enter Formula One until 2026. So, in 2025, he wouldn't have a place on the grid. A year for a driver is very precious. But couldn't he make a deal to stay at Stake? How long does it take for a team, an automaker, to adapt to a new sport? Especially coming from a factory, a car, and a team that aren't doing well at the moment. He's leaving Ferrari for a team that might not even make the podium? Or fight for points? Is it worth it here? Is this the moment in his career where he has the potential to compete for a world championship? So it's a bit of a complex decision. Carlos Sainz's second choice, Red Bull Racing. Carlos's contact with Red Bull Racing is not new. Even though it would be very advantageous for Carlos to win the race, and very advantageous for Red Bull to have the 2 best drivers on the grid, Carlos is leaving Ferrari and was unhappy with Ferrari, precisely because he couldn't stand being second driver any longer. So is leaving a team where you had the potential to be second driver several times, to a team where you're sure to be second driver, and certainly not the priority for a world title worth it. Of course, he would have more wins, more opportunities, but the chance of being an eternal runner-up is almost 100%, and nobody likes being second. So I think that's the argument that weighs most heavily on Carlos's mind at the moment.
I carefully listen a bit to everyone and hear a bit from everyone and make sure that I give myself some time to know exactly what I want to do in the future, where I want to go, and where I'm going to spend my next, 3-4 years of my career, So it's an important decision. I'm turning 30 this year, which means I'm probably around my peak, I think. So
to go back to a team that is the leader, the best, but for me to always be the reserve, to always be in second place, to not have my moment to shine. Is that worth it? So I think that's what's weighing most heavily. And Carlos Sainz's third option, which for me is practically definitive and the one he will choose, is Mercedes. Why do I say that? Firstly, the rumors are already very strong, in which many journalists mention that the contract between Mercedes and Carlos Sainz is already concrete. Ever since Hamilton announced he was leaving, they've been talking about Carlos going to Mercedes. But there is still a dispute over Kimi Antonelli and Fernando Alonso. But with Kimi not having the best of results in Formula 2 and Fernando now renewing with Aston Martin, Carlos Sainz's fate at Mercedes is looking more and more real. Mercedes is the team at the front of the grid. In other words, he's always in the top 4. They were the dominant team and the big power until a few years ago. And it's a team that copes very well when we're talking about first and second
basically
drivers. There's no denying that
didn't leave him any room. Did not leave Hamilton room there.
And it's Nico Rosberg, and Hamilton's onto the
George
grass.
Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And as much as we know that Hamilton is the priority and the first driver, often, depending on the scoring situation, the calendar, the standings, George Russell is the first driver and the priority for Mercedes. And the way they deal with this is very well resolved and developed within the team. We don't see any tension, fighting, or disrespect. Not least because they've been through the whole Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton thing in the past. They learned from their mistakes, and nowadays they deal with this issue very well. The priority is who's winning, even if someone is chosen as the first driver. And I think that's what Carlos needs at the moment. He's not going to be the first driver in any big team, and he knows it. So the best thing is to be second driver in a team where he knows that being second driver is good. And in this case, it's Mercedes. But he's swapping one wagon for another, or even worse. Things may change a lot from one year to the next. We're talking about a car that was ahead of Ferrari last year, so from one year to the next, things change a lot. Besides, Carlos has worked for practically all the most influential teams: Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Renault. The only one missing is Mercedes. And there's another point that makes me think that. Mercedes has no interest in long-term contracts, not least because they have Kimi Antonelli coming up from the bottom. Sainz doesn't want a long-term contract either. So it's very interesting for Carlos to have this relationship with Mercedes. And for me, it's already definitive, and the best option for him. We should see the smooth operator racing in black next year.